Hi there, students. Rail. Both a noun and a verb. Let's see, I'm sure you all know the meaning of rail as a noun, yeah? A railway, the rails of the train. Maybe you're hanging your clothes on a rail, yeah? Or there's a rail going down the side of the stairs. But I want to look at rail as a verb, to rail at something, to rail against something. And I think this is probably a meaning you don't know. Let's see, this means to complain angrily about something. He railed against the injustice that had been carried out on him. Yeah? So to rail, to be angry, to rant and rave about something. These people are... To rail. Yeah? He spends his life railing against immigration. So he's attacking it, he's criticizing it, yeah? He's denouncing it, okay? He's reviling it, to rail against something. My uncle is always railing at the profligate spending of our government, okay? So he's complaining angrily about it. Okay, so to use harsh, abusive language about something because you're angry with it, you think it's really unfair, yeah? To scold, to upbraid, to vituperate, yeah, to revile, okay? To talk angrily about something. So, people are railing against the new policy of the government. They are railing at the stupidity of the referee. Okay, so to express objections or criticisms in harsh language, in bitter, abusive language, yeah? I think very often if somebody is railing against something, very often they're just talking to themselves. It could be a harangue where they're railing against something and you have to listen to it. But if somebody is railing against something, then they're not very happy. They're complaining violently about it. So I think to rail against, to rail about, to rail at, yeah, is to denounce angrily. Yeah, he was fuming, he was really angry, he was railing against the decision that the referee had made. He was railing about the fact that he had been sacked from his job. Okay, so to rail against something, to be angry, Russian, to rail against, yeah, talking about something, criticizing it strongly, abusively, very strong language, and this is the idea of to rail against. Notice to rail is a regular verb. He railed against the injustices of society. He has railed at the neighbour's barking dog on various occasions. Then, as to formality, I think I'd probably give this a 6 in formality. I think you could use this in an informal conversation, although I think it's probably a less common choice of word. I think to rail against this is a good piece of vocabulary to use in your exams because, as I said, it's a less common choice of word, but it's perfectly good. Okay, so what about the origin? Well, this comes from a a French word, or a Middle French word, râler, which I think means to complain about, which I'm wondering probably itself comes from Latin, yeah. But I'm not sure. Oh yes, so ragere, yes, ragulare, to bray like a donkey, and then late Latin ragere, to neigh like a horse. And this old French word râler, meaning to growl or to mutter. Yeah, so I like the idea of the origin of rail here means braying like a donkey, because if somebody's railing against something, they're not doing anything positive, they're not trying to find a solution to it, and it's not doing them any good. Yeah, so I think sometimes I rail against people, against teachers who are insistent that you must learn all of the grammar about this. Grammar's useful, but communication's the first objective of language. So, to rail against, to rail at, to rail about. If you enjoyed the video, give it a rating, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now. To rail.